have been an incredible writer. Your first book, Ode to Lata, has had such an impact on so many of us, and then you've been a filmmaker. What's the transition been like, or do you think the two are connected somehow?
I think that this, as you can tell, was a very small movie, and it was done in 2 days with a group of friends, and with no budget. We just decided that we needed to make a film that was story-based. These days you see a lot of big production movies, a lot of money being spent on it, lots of scene changes, and you don't resonate sometimes with the characters. You go home, you've seen the movie, you don't really care. And I think that's because the focus has been more on the razzmatazz of production. But the script has suffered. They haven't really bothered to make you care about the characters. You don't know anything about these people and you don't really care. So we figured this would be a good challenge to just write a 15-minute movie where it doesn't leave from under the table. And hopefully you connect with these two people and you feel for them and you know everything about them, from their courtship, how they came together, and now that they have to say goodbye.
So it's the writing
it was
very important to you.
A return to a narrative-based film.
Right.
I was talking to somebody earlier on, and she was talking about one of the greatest films that she'd seen was Casablanca. But you couldn't make Casablanca today, because when you see Casablanca, the first 30 minutes of that film are in Rick's Cafe. They don't even leave that restaurant, that cafe. So today's movies are all about the scene has to change every 2 seconds because it's very MTV, very sort of video. So what happens when you just say, we're not leaving from under this table for 15 minutes. Now the pressure is on the writing and to make sure that you convey an entire relationship without sort of having all this...
This is why the film is so powerful, because obviously for a lot of people the Bombay attacks have such a huge emotional impact. But what we've seen is everything on wide angle or through television reporters.
Right.
So it's really fascinating that you zero in on these two individuals.
Right.
And that's what gives it its power. What was the casting process? How did you find...
Well, Ajay and I worked together because we made...
And some of you might recognize Ajay from commercials here in the US. So, Fiber, especially. Do you want to do that? Your Fiber one, lines?
My famous line.
Yes, your famous line. But
Ajay actually, when my first novel, The Ode, when we adapted that for the film, Ajay was in that film as Mr. Surani. So we had a working relationship. Randy was a friend, is a friend, and he's still a friend, and and a great actor. And Jess actually was a neighbor. I was taking my groceries out from the car when he was living in LA, and he said, "Oh, I'm an editor," and I'm like, "Well, I'm doing this thing, and can you work for free?"
Right. So, as someone who's not Indian, how were you aware of the attacks going on in Bombay a few years ago, or how did Ghalib sort of explain the context?
Of course, I was aware of the attacks, and I was aware of the racist.
You didn't film in Bombay, did you? No.
We filmed in
Santa Monica. Wow. But CNN was very helpful.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, so I was aware of the attacks, and then when a friend came to me and between jobs and said, "You want to do this project?" I read the script and thought it was very beautiful, and he gave us a chance to improvise a little bit under the table and work together in an intimate love story in this situation. I thought it was a very challenging situation, and it lent itself to a lot of great possibilities, and I went for it, and I saw it for the first time tonight, and I thought it was really beautiful, and I'm very proud to be a part of it.
Yeah! I think it was just Rebecca Hazelwood that got him to say yes.
One more question and I'll then throw it to the audience. The camera work is very urgent and restless, and it doesn't seem like you've used the tripod at all. So was there a reason? Especially you said you're in a very small space, or that's the idea.
Well, I mean, we still, it's hard to make something dynamic if you're not making scene changes. So we wanted to have that sort of cinema verite, but without sort of making it look like we were sort of forcing it. And that little bit of sort of pull and push and pull kind of thing, I think just gives it the dynamic that is missing when the characters can't move because they can't go anywhere. So once you start with that under the table, you really can't change the style later on. You got to keep doing it. But hopefully the story takes precedence and you sort of, don't think about that too much.
Audience questions, please. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to say, Dad, you made me cry. I'm so sorry.
Oh, thank
That was incredible, incredible piece. Very well done.
Thank you.
And I wish I would have done it myself.
Thank you. Well, you still can, because we actually just got the interest to. This is a snippet of a whole feature. It's actually, Embrace is a series of intimate love stories, 4 love stories, that are set against a backdrop of actual global terror events.
Wow.
So this actually expands into 9/11 to 7/7, and then a 4th event, which is an imaginary, sort of a fictional event, which gets averted, the disaster gets averted. So now we've been sort of approved or greenlit for the entire production, for the whole project. And this was an experiment to show investors. At the end of the day, it's a business. So you've got to show investors and interested parties that, look, if we could do this with no money in 2 days, if you give us some money and if you give us the room to be a little flexible, imagine what we could do. So, thank God it worked, and hopefully it resonated with you as well. So, thank you.
Was the edit of the film longer than the shoot?
Yeah, we actually, this is actually about, it may seem a little choppy because it's about 20-something minutes. But I'll tell you, a film is born so many times, and it's not the director, it's not even the writer. The editor is actually writing it, and this guy here is just, I worship him. I mean, he brought the movie out in a way that I could never have done without him. So, the editing is. Thank you.
Would you like to? I know editors usually don't like to talk a lot, but.
I mean, I'll answer any questions. I mean, we just really, to me, it was more about them and what they felt and the things that they did on, to make the decisions that they make. Because you don't wake up and you don't have a decision made. Like, there's a process to it. So that's really what we focused on and what triggered that process. And what do they feel?
So has he hired you for the feature?
Yeah.
We'll take a couple more questions, ladies and gentlemen. Does anyone have? Yes, sir.
How did you prepare for this role with such short time?
Is that for me?
Yeah.
You can't prepare for this, so I didn't really prepare. There's no way to prepare for something like this. Really, I mean, what are you going to do, to prepare for that? I mean, we just had to get under the table and do it. I mean, it's too emotional to spend a lot, like weeks before preparing, really, so you really just have to, think about the love story and being there for each other, and you can't really plan for what you do in a situation like that, except for just try to be there for the other person and just get under there and see what happens. So it was a surprise to me, and I knew the situation going in, the history and things like that, but what you're going to do in that situation, you're not going to know until you get there, so I left that to chance, and I left it to how I'd react to her, and whatever happened, happened, and I don't even remember what happened. I saw it today for the first time, because I was just reacting to her, and she was a great person to react to.
If I may add, well, you probably forgot I made him jog around the block for 2 blocks before he ended up at the door. But the one thing that it's really important for me to say is that one of the main reasons why we did this is because these global terror events have become such a soundbite for us, because we see something on TV on CNN, and then a month later it's another thing. And the thing that was really important is that we lose the humanity. We forget that there's all these love stories, and there were like lovers there, and husbands and wives there, and all these relationships was sundered by this nonsensical act of fanaticism. So this was, a humble attempt to bring some humanity back and realize that there were probably hundreds of such love stories that were impacted by something like that. Mothers and children and husbands and wives and lovers that sort of were planning so much. So it's not just an embrace for one lover to another saying goodbye, but it's also an embrace of your mortality. You know, you're saying goodbye. Everything that you worked for and dreamt of could be snatched away from you in an instant.
And I think the difficult thing was the choices that the couple have to make, because, you know, it was 3 days of murderous rampage, if you all remember, which I'm sure most of you do, and, you know, that's really where it hits you.
We'll take one more. Does anyone have one more question? No? So I will ask the last question, which is you said that you worked with no budget, and how do you plan on then getting the funding together for the feature?
Well, what we did was, you know, and this is something that came up in the panels, is that if there are any filmmakers here, you sort of have to develop relationships long term. You have to make sure that you don't go at the last moment to people saying, I need money.
You need to hustle.
You need to hustle, yeah. So, you know, I think that if you bring authenticity to a story, hopefully it resonates. But the most important thing was, they want to see you risk your money before they risk theirs.
Right.
You know, you're not going to go to someone and say, I need $3-4 million to make a movie. You're going to have to put some of your own blood, sweat, and finance into it. And if you're lucky, and if you have a group of people, creative people that are willing to do it for little or nothing, then you can come up with what is a prototype or a sample of what you're developing. And then you can go back to them and say, look, we can do so much more if you give us the finance that you're sitting on. But it's a long-term thing. You have to maybe make sure that you just don't have a script or an idea or a treatment. You have to come up with something that... So this is sort of like a teaser or a trailer, but it's an expanded trailer. So you can actually visualize, my God, you know, if this movie was completely stretched out, we would see Mira and Ben coming to the party, and maybe there would be some gunshots, and maybe the wife. So then you can play that whole thing out, but you don't want them to make that leap of imagination. You have to give them the sample and say, look, imagine now what else we can do.
Well, thank you so much. We all look forward to the future.